So this is Baruch Fleischman. I'm here at the Tikkun Elevator Kollel. And let me see if I can get this shaded a little bit. Immigration to the Holy Land in the 12th century. Now that's in the 1100s. Now Jews were prosperous. Some Jews were prosperous in Spain, but we understand in Spain there were blood libels. The church hates the Jews. And this goes back, as I've said several times in this series, to an ancient family fight. This is what the rabbis say. And I just understand the rabbis have a tremendous 4,000-year-old vision. How do they get that? By study. That's what we do. The Muslims call us the people of the book. That's what Muhammad called us. Because we study. We look and see what's going on around us so that we can better serve God. Now, that's as a people. And Spain is a big thing. So you see, here's the path of immigration to the Holy Land in the 12th century. We'll get some idea about where we're at. This is Castile in Spain, Barcelona, as they pronounce it today, France, Holy Empire, the Holy Roman Empire, all these places. These are the paths that you took in the Mediterranean. It's the Mediterranean Sea to get to the land of Israel and Jerusalem. And we're going to get into that in more detail, but let's read a little bit of the background of it. So the Jewish communities in the Holy Land. So we see in a situation where the Arabs, who are half brothers and full of hate, they hate us. They hate what they don't have, and they want what we have, which they can't have. The Jewish communities in the Holy Land. This is from the 12th to the 14th centuries. He's talking about that. We were never not there. So the continuous arrival of Christians from Europe did not substantially alter the life of the country, since it did not establish permanent settlements. The land was desolate, and even the Crusaders' seigneurial system was unable to provide adequate livelihood. During the Crusader period, there were a number of rural Jewish settlements, which had probably already been established during or before the Arab period. In the second half of the 12th century, Jews were living in Tiberia, in the capital of the Principate, which was the capital of what was called the Principality of Galilee, and in Shevat, or they pronounce it Safed, the important stronghold of the Galilee. It's on top of a mountain there, and I have some property there, which I'm currently not in. But these cities were surrounded by Jewish villages, but there were also many Jewish villages in these places. And since Saladin, which in Hebrew is spelled Salachadin, so forgive it, which means in Hebrew means forgive us from judgment, or forgive us, get us from judgment. So this concept of Jerusalem, Jews, with the exception of a few families, were forbidden to reside in the city. Nevertheless, when the time of Benjamin of Tudela, which we talked about in the previous shir, visited Jerusalem, he found Jews engaged in the craft of dyeing, for which they had purchased a monopoly from the king. Now, this is a little bit to understand how things worked. These Jews resided either near the king's palace or near the citadel, which is called David's Tower. Now, Tyre, let me bring this over here a little bit more. Tyre, Sidon, and Ashkelon, these are cities along the coast, had the largest Jewish communities in the country. According to Benjamin of Tudela, about 500 Jews resided in Tyre and 200 in Ashkelon. Cariites and Samaritans also resided in these cities too. Acre, Beirut, and Caesarea also had substantial Jewish population. The Crusader conquest opened a period of economic development from which the Jews benefited. Various crafts constituted their major source of income. In Tyre, for instance, Jews manufactured glass and were tradesmen. The settlers in the reconstituted Yishuv, that's the Jewish population in Eretz Yisrael, continued to maintain contact with their countries of origin, for example, Spain, from where they had come in the wake of the Crusaders. The importance of Rabbi Yehuda Halevi's Aliyah, that's Aliyah means an immigration, Aliyah means going up, so this Jews always feel like going to Israel is a tremendous spiritual elevation. That lies not only in its indication of a yearning for Eretz Yisrael, but also in its illustration of the possibility of putting that yearning into practice. Benjamin of Tudela was the first Jewish traveler to reach the Holy Land in the 1160s. In about 1175, now this name Patatiah of Regensburg, this is not a Spanish name, set out on his journey to Eretz Yisrael too. The Aliyah in 1209 of a group of rabbis and their pupils, headed by the Rabbi Samson of Ben Abraham of Sens, this is more Ashkenaz Jews, gave a considerable impetus to the revival of the Yeshuv. He said in 1216, Judah Harizi was on a visit to the Holy Land and met the group who came from France, headed by Rabbi Yosef ben Baruch of Clisson and his brother Meir. The disputation of Paris, which took place in 1240, and the public burning of the Talmud caused Rabbi Yehiel of Paris and his son to migrate with the Barcelona disputation, while the Barcelona disputation in 1263 caused the Ramban, the Nachmanides, to migrate in 1267. So you see how these are going. Now, what actually happens, one of the things that causes Jews to escape to Eretz Yisrael is that if you're going to be persecuted in Paris, where Jews without our books, very difficult to practice Judaism if you don't know how. So basically, they burned all of our books. It makes it very, very difficult to live in France. Then you had the disputation. There was a disputation then you had in Barcelona, then the disputation in 1263 that had to do with the Ramban. And then you see that the deck is not an open deck. It's a closed deck. Mean to speak that the Christians are never going to allow the Jews to be equal with them in any way. When Rudolf I of Habsburg, king of Germany, attempted to assert royal authority over the Jews through additional taxation, thousands of Jews led by Maharam, the Rabbi Meir ben Baruch of Rothenburg, decided to leave Germany. In 1286, Rudolf, that's thousands, he said, Rudolf issued orders to prevent this emigration. Now Maharam, this is a famous story amongst Ashkenaz Jews, was arrested while attempting to leave and delivered to Rudolf, who had him imprisoned. Rudolf, now does this sound familiar? This is just Jews who are living in the lands of people who hate us. It's an amazing thing that we get along with them because they need us. In a certain way, they build us up, but by the same token, they're vicious. And so we see Rudolf demanded a huge ransom for the Maharam, but the latter refused to be ransomed on the grounds that this would serve as a precedent for the authorities to imprison rabbis and leaders of the community in order to extort large sums of money from them. He died in prison in 1293. This man is a saint and a tremendous hero. Jews also migrated to the Holy Land from North Africa and Egypt. Ashkelon was the focus of this aliyah. Now we'll look at the maps on this in the next time, but right now we're getting some background, and we understand once again the slingshot effect of persecution of Jews going to Eretz Yisrael. And we see that the war that's going on right now in Eretz Yisrael is a war for survival. Because in the United States, let's say, where we have tremendous, tremendous freedom here, and as a result of that, I'm able to speak, and I speak my mind, to talk about there's an outside war and there's an inside war. The inside war is a family war. It's a family between our twin brother. We have a twin brother, which is mostly Europe, our Christianity today, and our half-brother, who are the Arabs and those who are under the influence of the teachings of what we call Yishmael or Ismail, which is the Arabs. So he says in 1209, 1210, the Babylonian exile ark means the head of the exile, visited Eretz Yisrael. Possibly his name was David ben Zakkai II. He was the exilarch in Mosul. So we hear this word Mosul now in terms of war. From his visit, we learn that Tzfat which was a state that is the center of Jewish settlement in the Galilee. Little is known about the Jewish community in Tiberia. Benjamin of Tudela described it as having about 50 Jewish families. An old tradition relates that the disciples of Maimonides, who died in Fustat in 1204, brought his remains for burial in Tiberia. There, Tiberias had favorable conditions for Jews to settle and for the revival of its yishuv. That the yishuv means of our settlement in our own land. So he said the beginning of the 13th century, that's the 1200s, saw a strengthening of the Jewish community in Jerusalem. Rabbi Yechiel ben Isaac HaSarfati resided there and maintained contact with the Jewish community of Fustat. Now, Sarfat in Hebrew is France. So this was a person, Ashkenaz Jews from there. Controversies within the community were not resolved until 1240. In 1244, the city was sacked and destroyed by Rizmi Turks. When the Ramban came to Jerusalem in the year 1267, he found it in a state of ruin. The minyan, which is the amount of Jews, which is 10 men, of Jews who gathered for prayer on the Sabbath, were the Sharia Yishuv, the remnant of that Yishuv that returned. He had a Torah scroll brought from Shechem and renovated the building for use as a synagogue. In 1268, he moved to Acre, where he died in 1270. This is a famous person known as the Ramban. Acre was a large and important Jewish center in the 13th century. Now, it's on the sea. It had a Jewish quarter and a Jew's house in 1206. All of these were noted. When the newly crowned king of Jerusalem, John of Brienne, now we're talking about Crusader times, when he visited Acre, he was received by representatives of the Frankish and Greek communities and by members of the Jewish community holding a Torah scroll. Judal al-Harizi described the community as ignoramuses, not a man amongst them who could stand in the breach. In other words, no one knew how to learn. And this despite the arrival of 300 rabbis from France and England in the year 1211. As we had said, the persecutions drove people out as well. The Muslims conquered the city in 1299 and massacred its Christian and Jewish inhabitants. One of the survivors, who reached Spain, who was Rabbi Isaac of Acre, described the destruction. Among those killed was Rabbi Solomon, the grandson of Rabbi Simon of Sens, which is, once again, France. The Jewish captives were apparently brought to Egypt, where they were ransomed by the community. Now, this is also a pattern that you see in the Mediterranean. This is that, actually, today we would say in the Arab world, because the Arabs control the southern part of the Mediterranean, and the Muslim faith is all throughout that part of Asia and Africa. He says that kidnapping and ransoming is a part of the lifestyle of these people. Finally, he says the impoverished state and status of the Yishuv continued until the immigration waves of the 14th century inaugurated the process of regeneration. So in the 1200s that we see that there was immigration, there was also massacre, and there was always, and this is an important idea, a remnant that grows again. This is Baruch Fleischman, your Saba here. We're at the Tikkun Elevator Kollel. We're looking at the work of Dr. Haim Beinart, categorizing and putting together the survival of the Jews in the Middle Ages.